Ipswich is a town that loves its history, nearly 400 years of it. But history has a funny side effect. The longer a place exists, the harder it becomes to decide what should change and what absolutely must not. Should towns grow? Should the state tell them how? Should a planning board shape the future of a community or protect the past? These questions can turn a quiet New England town meeting into something resembling gladiatorial combat. My next guest has stepped directly into those debates. She served in town government, weighed in on some of Ipswich's most contentious planning discussions, and formed strong opinions about how a town like this should navigate the future. And when she wasn't doing that, she rode a bicycle across Europe, more than 3,400 miles. Geez, for me, going to Dairy Queen is like scaling Mount Everest on a bike, so that's pretty impressive. Because apparently local politics for her wasn't challenging enough. Today we're talking about endurance, civic conflict, and the strange art of making decisions when half the room already disagrees with you. This is the Sane Estate. I'm John Woolforth, and here we are on yet another tour of the Ipswich state of mind. Today I'm joined by Helen Weatherall. Helen comes from a family deeply connected to Ipswich civic life and has been involved in town government, including work on the planning board and broader community planning discussions. Anyone who's attended town meetings knows that conversations about zoning, housing, and development can quickly become lively. Helen has been right in the middle of those conversations. And as far as if navigating Ipswich politics wasn't enough of a challenge, she also completed the transcontinental race, which I mentioned was 3,400 miles. Ugh. This is dizzying. Across Europe and unsupported. In other words, fend for yourself, guys. So we're going to talk about civic engagement, tough decisions in local government, and what it takes to ride a bicycle across an entire continent. Helen, welcome to the Sane Estate.
Thank you for having me. I'm really flattered and honored to be here.
Oh, thank you so much. I'll take that as a compliment. So that works for me. Well, let's just start at the beginning. So, you come from a family, as we said, that's well established here in Ipswich, had a lot of influence over the years, or at least get in part of, how things have evolved. So your father served in several town roles over the years. We know that. So what essentially was it like growing up around that kind of civic engagement on a daily basis?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind with that question is I, like everybody, as a kid, you only know what you're given. You only know the climate you're born into. And so
Right.
You respond to that. So I don't think any kid in particular feels special, even if they, are in any kind of, different kind of a landscape. So for me, it was just normal. I just rolled with it.
But so do you feel that sort of created the fabric of maybe some ways that how you
Right.
think or look at things?
Yeah, and yes, and like everyone else, is you start to learn this stuff over the course of your life when you start to compare your own climate and upbringing and whatever you're exposed to someone else's, and maybe for the first time to realize, oh, that's not like every other household necessarily, or it's different. Somehow you come to realize the differences.
Yeah.
And so, for instance, one thing very stood out very much in my household, my family, was conversation. And my father, who was British, I don't know if that part played into it, but I think partly in his schooling,
Right.
that for him, a conversation was as much a discussion. And maybe people who are listening and knew him would chuckle at that, because he liked pushback. For him, that was part of what a conversation was about. And I'm sure that I inherited that because I honestly, I'll get a little bored with just a climate of people where you all agreeing on the same thing. I mean, what's the point? Sure, talk about the weather, but I'd rather I'd rather dig in and think about things more deeply.
Well, I would think you can't achieve change without conflict of some type, whether it be even just conversational or,
Right.
political conflict to some degree.
Right.
So,
And I won't go too far with this, but I will say, it's funny because I'm sort of bringing the cycling thing into it, which is, conflict. It doesn't have to always be conflict. It's friction, and you're not going to move forward without friction. So hey,
that's now you're throwing physics into it here, because I get that, and it's funny. Friction's a buzzword these days. It seems I'm hearing it a lot, and I don't know why that is. Maybe I've just been like under a rock and haven't been noticing.
You don't come off as someone under a rock. No. Yeah.
Hopefully not. Did you always imagine you'd eventually get involved in town government? Or was this something that just, you weren't 6 years old going, when I grow up, I want to yell at people at a town meeting? No.
I think, whenever somebody says, to be honest, it's like, well, aren't we all trying to be honest? So, but I'll just begin with, to be honest, I think as a kid, maybe because I'm tall now, and I was tall as a kid early on, and grew up with two older brothers, and so in kind of a boy-dominated, sort of social group. So I was always trying to keep up and be a part of something, and so I guess I've always been inclined to being more bold than I don't know if it's normal or not. I've been kind of on the bolder side of things. And so if I have an opinion, I've always been inclined to share it.
I think that's important that you do.
Thank you.
I'm sure a lot of people probably didn't feel the same way.
Yeah, and I do scratch my head. I scratch my head because it's just my natural disposition,
That's what leaders are, though. I would think that there's some element of that. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Recognizing that there's an issue that needs to be addressed and offering a solution.
Right. And I'll be generous. I'll just try this. Let's try this. Through life, I believe that the thing to do is to go on learning and go on improving. That's what I try to do. I recognize that I tend toward boldness. And what I've had to learn is to zip it, zip it and listen a little more, So people who are maybe not at first take bold, but are listening, they have other attributes that are equally as important. And so right. I've become very aware of that and the importance of that.
Well, that's good news. You are hearing both sides, which is key. So what about, you get into this stuff. When did you realize that local politics might get a little bit, intense?
Well, I don't know, probably high school.
Debate class?
No. Or, again, going back to sports, I don't know, sports always figure in, because, honestly, I think kids learn about social interactions through sports a lot. Obviously, tons of kids out there playing soccer, and for a lot of different reasons. You learn teamwork, and what is teamwork? Well, it's interacting and finding your way, how to be effective among other people. So, yeah, probably because I played sports since I was a little kid and all that stuff. And then, I don't know, in group discussions in school and college and stuff like that,
That's where it sort of built from.
Yeah, I think so.
Awesome. So I know, you reached out because you saw the episode with Trevor Meek with our famous Ipswich local newspaper, which I think is inherently critical to maintain for information purposes as well as communal purposes. So when you saw that, you were like, hey, you actually had a hand in helping get that thing launched. And I know that you organized a forum at Ascension Church about the state of local news in Ipswich. And that event helped spark the effort that eventually led to the paper launching. So why don't you give us a little bit more info on what happened there?
Okay, yeah, I really appreciate your remembering that. I think, I know that we, citizens of Ipswich, are really appreciative of having a local paper, and I think more and more people have come to realize that that's a rarity. Yeah. And so if people are listening, remember, happily or unhappily, I made a first attempt at running for select board shortly after my husband and I moved to Ipswich. I mean, I grew up in Ipswich and I returned to Ipswich. I never ever imagined I'd frankly want to or ever would return to my hometown, but I did for good reasons, and so I started to look around and see, well, what's going on in town and what's changing and what's going on. It points to what is now known as the Essex pastures question, which the old timers like myself think of as Bruni Farms. And right. I as a kid, is probably one of my first jobs is picking strawberries, probably, for meager wage, but
at Essex.
Yeah, as a job.
Okay.
For me, it was a farm stand and buying cherries and stuff like that. Anyway, it was up for question, and I thought to myself, hey, it'd be a great place for a solar field. And some people out there, I'm sure, would be rolling their eyes at that. I mean, there's all sorts of things to do with available land, and people can have their opinions of what the best use is, and there's all sorts of different uses. So that's what went through my mind, and I think I contacted at that time Ethan Parsons and said, hey, I got this idea, and he said, hey, you might want to get in touch with Carolyn Britt, who was with the Climate Resiliency Group.
Yeah.
And he said, you might want to get involved with them. So I thought, well, what the heck, take some action, see what's going on. So I did. I attended a meeting, and I put what people who know me well would have recommended to me, which is, Helen, listen first. Listen first, and then contribute if it's wanted. So I did. I listened. And after listening to the group for a bit, I had some ideas. And I let them know I had some ideas to share, but I would share them, after the fact. And so they asked me at the end of it to share what thoughts I had. And frankly, I don't remember the fine details now, what I shared. But one of the members, I can't think of her name off the top of my head right now, which is embarrassing, but said, Helen, sounds like you should run for select board. There's a seat opening. And she at the time suggested that I run. Yeah. And they looked around the table and thought, well, is that even possible? And, it was just down to the wire. So I was able to get on as a write-in candidate. So I did, and then ran, and, and it's a massive uphill battle for all sorts of, yeah. But I did pretty well, considering it being a write-in candidate. Yeah. And anyway, blah, blah, blah. So that's how it began.
So you got in on that particular effort that first time?
No, I didn't get in. I didn't. I failed.
Oh, okay.
I failed. And as a matter of fact, I think it was that time around that Bill Wasserman, who I knew, he was one of my parents' circle of friends. So I knew him that way. Uh-huh. And I probably had communicated with him at some point or other. I think he scolded me and
oh, really?
I think he wasn't impressed with my I don't know. Thought I should have. Yeah, I think he thought I should knock on every single door in Ipswich and had failed to do so or something. And he's not wrong, right? But it was a little hard to take in the rain. I don't remember it was the first. Anyway, so I tried again. I tried again. And why did I try again? I don't know. And I failed the second time too. Oh. And then and if I'm remembering right, then I thought to myself, well, the planning board. And so, I know, in between all this, I continued to get involved, and there was the, the committee, probably the Housing Production Committee, or no, Community Development Community Development Committee, whatever that's called. Which turned out to be an enormous group of people with no absolute defined leadership.
Running around
so
I
participated in that and learned some more, and then I think that's when I decided to try again for the select board, which I failed again at. And
Three times in a row?
Twice.
Okay.
Well, and people say, oh, Helen, it's the third time's a charm or something. But in the meantime, I think I thought maybe the select board's not where it's at for me. Maybe it's the planning. And I think anybody who makes an effort is going to have people who support them, and of course people who last in the world they want to see is that person on any kind of position.
Yeah.
But so I had supporters, and I think people must have said, "Hey, Helen, how about the planning board?" You know, and as I've said, you know, I did get a graduate degree in planning and development at Tufts University, so it seemed like a good idea.
Yeah, that seems it works better.
Yeah. So, and at that time it was Tony Marino who was town manager,
Yeah.
and I had conversations with him, and then wound up, you know, being given a seat on the planning board. So that's how that happened.
That's pretty neat. So you ran for select board twice, didn't work out, and then Wasserman's scolding you for, you know,
Yeah.
not being aggressive enough, I guess, right? So what did you discover during that campaign, that how hard it was to reach people, right? Like, what was it about that?
Exactly right. Exactly right. And hopefully haven't been too long-winded with this, but that really does kind of spell out how it all came about. And so, you know, I had a dialogue a little bit with Bill Wasserman, and what I learned, and also it coincided with that whole, it was the Americans Who Tell the Truth that I can't remember the name of the artist, but he continues to work, and he does portraits of Americans who've made a difference and taken sort of stepped into leadership roles in various areas, you know, of society.
Not the guy who like did the Obama.
Yeah, he lives in Maine, and I can't think of his name. I apologize for that. But so we, Ipswich, had 3 or more, I don't know how many paintings, but of his to display.
Yeah.
And I think one was in the Historical Society, and one might have been at Zoomies, I can't remember. And there were talks given about it. And anyway, so, and I participated in that somehow. Again, it's a little foggy, but in the process of, you know, trying to run for select board, you know, we all have social media. Now we're way too familiar with social media, but for me anyway, social media was fairly new then. Yeah. I had been reluctant to get on Facebook for, you know, and then did because hell, everybody else is.
That's
yeah, and so you find yourself, how are you going to communicate with people if you're not? So I gave in and got my own Facebook, and then, but then you realize it feels like you're reaching people with Facebook, but you are and you're not, because I find that the people who do participate in conversations on Facebook tend to be on either end of the spectrum. You know? Yeah. People, so they can be the noisemakers often. And so that can be distracting. And I feel like a lot of people just scroll through the conversation and don't really participate. So you really don't know what they're thinking. And, you know, anyway, and it occurred to me that growing up, we had the, you know, Ipswich Today, and we had, what was it? I don't know. I can't think of we had 2 newspapers.
Ipswich Today, huh? Never heard of that.
There was Ipswich Today, and then there was, I can't think of the name of it. Yeah, it must have been.
Ipswich Chronicle.
Yeah, and actually, you know, Bill Wasserman, I think Bill Wasserman was involved with both of them. And as a kid growing up, because I had 2 parents who were involved, you know, my father was involved in the school committee and headed up the Historical Society, and was just kind of, you know, involved. And my mother was chairman of the Conservation Commission and very involved. Anyway, you know, so I was kind of aware of the newspaper, either because my parents are being written about, or they're angry at something, or, you know, whatever. And so, and it just dawned on me, it's like, whoa, you know, we didn't at that time really, when I was running for planning board, we didn't really have a paper. We had, I don't know, that thing and the thing, sorry to be, you know, we had newspapers in Beverly and Salem that might report a little bit. Yeah. But it was nothing. It wasn't really news, you know. It's talking about lacrosse scores or something. Anyway, so I started thinking about that, and I actually called up, I thought the thing to do was to have a forum, you know, to talk about what's happening in local news, because it was actually being talked about in mainstream media, like what's the demise of local news.
So you were seeing stories about the loss of local newspapers around the country, and the buyouts, corporate buyouts of other, you know, well-known papers.
Right. So I just proposed it, and I called Bill Wasserman up and said, "What do you think of this?" He said, "I think it's a great idea." So then I got together, made a bunch of phone calls, and got 8 people, including John Muldoon and Bill Wasserman, to participate with. And I wish I could reel off names right now, but other people who are involved in newspapers and Newburyport and places.
Okay.
And it was really, really interesting. It was held at the Ascension Church in the Boone Hall.
Right.
And then, I think, I mean, to be fair, John Muldoon was doing his blog. At that point, it was a blog.
Really?
And and Bill Wasserman obviously had heaps of knowledge about running a newspaper.
Right. That's what I got.
And, he had tons of get up and go on him till his final breath, I'm sure. So the two of them hooked up and launched the new paper.
Fantastic.
So,
That's a
but
good idea.
I want to, I can't help but feel like, hey, I think I had a little bit of a hand in that,
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
Sounds like the forum idea would have, I think, brought the minds together that were decided that we should do something about
Right.
that. Right.
And and to give myself a little pushback, it's like, well, yeah, the need was there and the desire was there, and maybe I was just a slight little cat, like a spark that so made it happen. These things.
But like you said, it's like talking about comparing the newspaper to social media, right?
Right.
Some people say that social media is democracy in action. Do you think that's true? Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, we could do a whole series on this conversation, right?
This is
I think this. I think the thought I just had immediately off the top of my head is I think the social media we know now is not the social media we know like 2 or 3 years ago.
It's become more heated, probably more.
Yeah. Again, we all know the country we're living in right now, the world we're living in, and there's, I don't want to go into that too much. I don't think there's freedom of expression occurring.
I would say there's probably some truth to that. So if a town, it's good that we have the newspaper, and I think we both feel that's important to have it.
Right.
But what do you think if you lose it? What do people don't realize you lose if the paper disappears? What are they not? What is it they don't think would be, or I should say, what is it they're not aware that they will lose if a paper goes away?
Right. A target.
A target.
Well, I mean, because you can. Well, because
this is true, though.
It's like the common. What it is the commons, and I think we've lost sight of what do we mean by the commons? I mean, the commons are we have think of Boston Common, right? Boston Common. It's a clog of traffic. It's something you cut across. You hope you're going to get mugged, whatever. But in fact, what the commons were and are, in some place out west, remain a place where you can graze all your animals. Like it's a free for all.
Yeah.
Put your stuff out there. It doesn't belong to anyone. It belongs to all of us. And so that's what the paper is. And so it's a target in the sense that it misquoted me. It got that wrong. It's slanted. It's great. I love it. It has a beautiful picture of my daughter on the front cover, something like that. And the point is, it's all of ours. It's all of ours. So it's a public place where you can target all your feelings and thoughts, and you are reading the same thing. You're reading about the same, results of the lacrosse game or the planning board, and you can. Yeah, and then what it is when you go to the bank or whatever, and you see so and so in the line that you want to avoid because or the person you agree with, then you step forward and say, hey, I saw something in the paper, So you have that sort of like water cooler moment or whatever it is, which you wouldn't otherwise have because you wouldn't have that common. I don't know what the word. You know what I mean? You all have the paper to operate off of. That's what I'm thinking.
Because it's concrete. I mean, at least the
Right.
print version, it is what it is. It doesn't change once it's out. So people don't remember that, right? And with social media, if someone had something important to say, it gets buried. It's gone in seconds. Somebody else is already
Right. Or even deleted.
talking over that.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And sometimes people don't like responses to their comments, they'll delete them out.
Right.
I see that happen too, sure. And
Right.
it's unfortunate, but that is sort of a common thing. So I think that it is important to have the paper because you can get more precision
Right.
commentary.
And again, I won't, I'll try to rein myself in, but I think we all know, like the way, we all know you can get in trouble with an email because you don't have a facial expression to deal with. Like, what do they mean by that? You can't really tell. And sometimes if you don't know a person well enough and they're being shorthand with the response, you can misread it in terms of the psychology behind it. Yeah, and I think that happens with social media because same problems.
Well, I posted the interview about the interview with Trevor Meek on the Ipswich Local News page online on Facebook, and immediately it was described as a dying liberal rag.
Yeah. Oh, the paper?
Yeah. And
That's
I found that interesting, and I actually brought this point up to Bob Waite when I spoke with him, that you know, he basically said Bill Wasserman was a liberal Democrat, but Muldoon was like, no, we're gonna keep this, balanced. This is gonna be a fair and
Right.
just objective paper. So I believe that. I think that that's actually the way it was intended. One of the interesting things that Bob Waite said was that the right doesn't necessarily, they're not as good as the left as putting out announcements and putting out messaging.
The right isn't?
Yeah, at least locally.
Interesting.
In the local paper.
Oh, I think that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought that was an interesting point in itself.
No, yeah.
So serving on boards like the planning board, right? It puts you right at the center of some of the biggest decisions that towns make, like Rooney Marketplace or 3A or whatever, right? The development, the zoning, the housing, the wetlands protection. These are all things that you talk about, but not small issues, right? So what's something about the planning board service that residents don't understand or not too aware of?
Wait, could you say that again? Just, I want to make sure I understand.
What's something about serving on the planning board that residents often misunderstand? They don't really get or are aware of, for that matter.
Well, there's probably a lot of things.
Throw it out there.
Yeah. Let's see. Well, okay, the role of the planning board, as I think I had it explained to me, is to always have the bylaws in mind, and that it's the bylaws and adhering to the bylaws that determine how decisions should be made. So, and the planning board also is working into conjunction with or tandem with, or however the words are, with the planning office. So those two, have to always be in the forefront of our minds. And that's kind of changed, it changes, 3A comes along and things take on a different shape a little bit. But I think what we can all agree on in general is that any particular committee or board isn't a place for an individual to basically set up a tent and impose their own vision of a town. That's not what's supposed to happen. So at the same time, well, I can speak for myself, which is the planning board, and it's the planning. What is it? Oh my God, planning development office. I often would feel that what happened to the word planning? There's an awful lot of talk and focus on development. It's either we need more development, or there's a development proposal, or questions concerning a development, and the word development is at front and center to the question. There was I was about to say there was very little, or seems to be very little, focus and concern given to the word planning.
Yeah.
But then the next thing that came to my mind is, well, Helen, we have the housing production plan, we have the comprehensive plan, we have various plans, and rein me in if I go too far. But often I would get really frustrated because I feel like we proceed as if we don't have those plans. And when I got on the planning board, I'd just been involved in the community development plan. And I studied the writing of comprehensive plans, at university. And what really, really, even to this moment, bothers me is we townspeople and our tax money went into developing these plans.
Yeah.
And the thing gets written, and we hire a consultant, and people put man and women hours, and non-binary, collusiveness, hours of really, we hope, good intention work into that stuff. And then I don't know what happens to it.
That's interesting.
I mean, okay, raise your hand, people. How many of you read the comprehensive plan for Ipswich?
So it's like,
how many of you?
So really the end result is more of not so much a plan as a reaction?
Well, I think in part too, it's required by the state that towns have comprehensive plans.
Yeah, okay.
So you check that off, and we've done that, we got that, and then we forget about it.
So you really just don't even, so you're saying the end result doesn't even resemble.
And we tend to revisit the same questions. People say, we don't need any more open space. We got plenty of open space. We need more housing. And I think in that moment, the right thing to do is say, well, yeah, why don't we pull out our comprehensive plan and turn to chapter 3 and look what we all decided on, what makes sense for how is Ipswich going to proceed in this moment. That's what we're supposed to do, but we don't. We never do. So, and, I would say we should have a section front and center in the public library. We have documents. And actually, I think there probably is. And maybe somebody correct me and say, well, Helen, go to you to say so. But we do have that section, because I can actually picture, I don't know the name of what are the documents from maybe? If you go into the main room of the library and take a left where the computers are.
Yeah, the documents room?
There is a called? Good.
I'm not sure if it's actually called
there's
that.
There's a shelf there with interesting documents for and about Ipswich. I guess my point being is there are resources which should both be made readily available and people should use. One other thing. Okay, this is just me having a little beef, but how many times are people listening? You're on social media and somebody say, "We'll ask a question," or even I love Ipswich, or whatever the Facebook Ipswich thing is. Does anyone know where I'm thinking, Jesus Christ, sorry, forgive me. Don't we all have Google?
I think some of the time it's an attempt just to interact with people.
That's
honestly.
Kind. You're right. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that, but
no, there's nothing wrong with that.
With ChatGPT, with AI, just we're being encouraged not to think.
Well, so in some cases too, I will say, when you're saying can someone recommend a good plumber, right? You want word of mouth for that.
That's fair, but you're not. Yeah, you might for Amy's List or whatever it is that can recommend a plumber. That's fair. That's good. I'm totally behind that. But when you ask a question to the general public of something that's highly Googleable,
most people
tends to.
I'm sorry.
No, I've
made my
point.
People
I made my point. I probably ruffled some feathers, but I think it's I would just encourage people to do a little more work they're inclined to do.
I think what's funny is a lot of people who probably answer did the same thing. They just Googled it. If it's not recommending as someone from experience, it's more like, oh, I just Googled that and here's your answer.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you could. That's another thing we could have a big conversation about forever.
We are losing our ability to think. I grant you that because of the advent of social media, Google, AI. All these things are contributing to that. But it's if you're aware of it, then you can temper it, I think.
Right.
as an individual. You have
Yeah.
the ability to do it yourself. There's no one
I
stopping
guess
you
just
from
to
that.
tone it down or to put a finer point on my point is, and we all know this, that, you know, it's dangerous to basically become a couch potato with your brain, you know?
Agreed.
Be willing and require that it's the benefit of all of us if you actually use your own brain. You know?
I think it's important. I mean, we have them for a reason. You know,
Right.
if we start depending on outside stimuli to provide all the information or even experiences, then we're going to be in trouble.
Right.
So, one of the things that comes up a lot in debates, in town debates, is the difference between how a decision gets made and what decision ultimately gets made. Right? It sort of sounds like what you were just talking about. Do we sort of feel that? Do we already answer that question?
Wait, do you mind rephrasing that again?
Sure. So one thing that often comes up in town debates is the difference between how a decision gets made and what decision actually gets made. So it's like how this decision is made and what one it actually does end up getting made.
Well,
Right.
okay, there's different ways to answer this, and one is, you know, with a political response, which is, you know, in a perfect world, all things would be considered, everything would be weighted equally, common sense would reign, money would be well spent, time would be well spent, and you'd arrive at the best solution. That doesn't happen most often, you know? And I'm not the first person to say that, and I'm sure Ipswich is not alone in what I would say is arriving at solutions to problems after kicking the can down the road. And you can run the clock out on a lot of options.
Yep.
And then arrive at a less than advantageous solution.
That's one of my favorite phrases because I've heard it many times in this town. I've actually said it multiple times when you hear about these meetings and what's going on. And you know, for example, the public safety building, right?
Right.
So a year and a half ago, oh no, we don't like the look of it. So we're gonna hold up and we're gonna rethink the look of it.
Right.
And then we say, okay, now it's good to go. It doesn't look a whole lot different, but it's still good to go. But now it's $14 million more. There's a kick the can down the road
Yeah.
example to me.
Yeah.
You know, you waited for something to address the problem
Right.
too long, and then when you did, now
Yeah.
it's cost more money.
Yeah. And yeah, again, another subject that we could have, you know, a year's worth of talk about. Yeah. And I think maybe one reason why towns like Ipswich or groups like Ipswich, because we are a group basically,
Yeah.
is, you know, it's not all bad. I think part of it is people want to be fair and people don't want to, you know, people want to be kind and people want to do the right thing. And the thing is, if you have too many people behaving like that, then I mean, somebody's got to take charge. And then somebody's got to make decisions. And so I think you can have both of those happen at once, where too much of the softness, and then somebody says, you know what, we got to act. And then you get this whole bunch of crowd of angry people saying, what do you mean? You know, that's not fair. It's not, you know. My own, I do want to say, as far as the public safety building goes, just as an example, you know, and I think everyone listening is aware of the fact that my very own brother, you know, is the chair of the public safety building committee. And I've had conversations with my brother about it.
Right.
You know, one of the things I regret that didn't happen is early on, just engage the public. You know, so, you know, you can engage the public every step of the way. And I've heard it said, that's not my job. You know, okay, fair enough. You're not getting a paycheck for this, but if you do step forward and find yourself like in a committee, you're taking on a role, and then so serve that role. And so I would say, involve the public, because it is their taxpayer money that's involved. It is their community that this is going to sit in. This is their community.
Right.
It is at the end of the day. So involve them. So even from day one, you could say, okay, we had a meeting. We threw out ideas. These are our ideas. We threw them out, and you could post them at town hall. Say, these are the ideas we came up with.
Yeah.
And people say, ooh, that's interesting. And you could say, leave your notes if you want, what do you think of this? Put your little piece of paper in the slot, and we'll review it at the next meeting. And we'll, see if you start from day one, by the time you get to the final, choice of the design firm and their, rendition of the plan, people would have had buy-in. They would have had involvement. They'd have less reason to be insulted, shocked, or whatever they'd be at that result. And by then, you've already spent how much money?
Yeah.
So I wish we'd, and I spent years in school in places like New York City, and in New York City and places you'll see where they'll put, even just you'll walk by this blocked off block, behind a chain link fence, and I don't know, plywood put up, but they'll put a rendition, of the what's coming next.
Yeah.
So that people walking by is like, oh, that's what we're going to see next, And I betting they do that for a lot of different reasons. One is probably advertising for the architectural firm, but it's probably also psychologically preparing people for what's about to be there.
Yeah.
And some people are going to be excited, like, whoa, that looks cool, or, oh my God, but by the time it's built, they're familiar with it.
Yeah.
So I'd like to see more of that.
Do you think it's, do you think people are more interested in being heard than being right?
Well, I think psychologically, I think being heard is more important than being right. I really do.
As long as you can take being wrong.
Well, sometimes you don't know you're wrong.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's why you need to be heard.
I mean,
so
how many
someone can
times
tell
have you
you're wrong?
painted a room in your house like, oh my God, I painted the floor of one of a place I was living in with an idea I was going to do design on the floor, and it was, honest to God, it was like swimming pool blue, and it was horrifying. But so often you get that little paint chip at the paint store, you can't tell. So that's an example of I was so wrong, And it's okay to say you're so wrong by choosing a bad color paint. It's easier to say that than, oh my God, I was so wrong, in buying that stock. I just lost half my money.
Well, here's where technology is a good thing, because now you can, look at it in your room.
Right.
You look at the color, you can take a picture of your room and put the color in.
Exactly.
So it's kind of like, that's kind of neat, that
it is.
thing.
Yeah.